I guess the best place to begin is the end, because that's the only place where the truth finally made sense. Picture me in a courtroom that smells like stale coffee and regret, sitting across from my cheating wife while a judge tried to figure out if I was legally obligated to raise a child who looked about as related to me as a lizard looks to an eagle. My family life had become a courtroom drama, a sitcom, and a bad conspiracy theory all mashed together. But how did we get here? Well, let's rewind the tape, because betrayal doesn't start with the baby. It starts with the lies we tell ourselves. Everyone in my suburban neighborhood thought we were the perfect couple. We had the house with the white picket fence, the matching SUVs, and the Sunday BBQ invitations that made us look like America's sweetheart duo. Behind closed doors, though, it was more like a reality TV show titled Toxic Love: The Betrayal Chronicles. My wife, let's just call her Madison, because of course her name had to be Madison, was the queen of appearances. Smiling at church potlucks, waving to neighbors like we were living in a Hallmark movie, posting #FamilyGoals selfies with me on Instagram while secretly DMing her coworker Brad. Yes, Brad, there's always a Brad, isn't there? The irony was, I wasn't even suspicious at first. That's the trick of infidelity. It doesn't walk into the room with flashing neon lights that say, "cheating wife at work." It creeps in like background noise until you can't ignore it anymore. Madison started working late. At first, I bought the excuses. Then came the mysterious girls' trips to Vegas, where apparently none of her girlfriends ever posted a single picture with her. It's Vegas. Who goes to Vegas and doesn't post at least one blurry selfie holding a margarita the size of a toddler? That was my first clue. But the true beginning of the end. The pregnancy announcement. Picture the scene. I come home from work, exhausted, dreaming of a cold beer and ESPN, and there's Madison standing in the kitchen with a smug smile and a positive pregnancy test. She delivered the news like it was a Hallmark Christmas commercial, soft lighting, a fake tear in her eye, whispering, "We're going to be parents." And I'll admit it, my heart actually swelled for a moment. Because despite the cracks in our toxic love, despite the whispers of cheating, despite the gut instinct screaming something's wrong, I wanted to believe. I wanted family. I wanted redemption. But here's where the story flips into parody territory. Instead of celebrating like normal newly expecting parents, my brain immediately went into conspiracy theory mode. I was suddenly every guy on Reddit convinced the moon landing was fake. The timelines didn't add up. The dates didn't make sense. When I tried to calculate the night of conception, I realized it was the exact week I had been away on a work trip in Chicago. Unless Madison and I had discovered interdimensional long-distance intimacy, I wasn't the father, at least not in the biological sense. From that moment, I became a detective in my own house. I checked receipts, phone records, even her Starbucks orders. Pro tip: when your wife suddenly switches from pumpkin spice lattes to black coffee, ask questions. That's not a preference, it's a cover-up. I downloaded apps I didn't even understand just to track her location. It felt like living in a low-budget spy movie where the villain was my cheating wife and the secret weapon was her belly bump. And then came the whispers, friends dropping hints, a coworker telling me Madison was close to Brad. My neighbor awkwardly mentioning she saw Madison's car parked at the Holiday Inn on a random Tuesday afternoon. At first, I brushed it off, because who wants to admit their entire life is a fraud? But the more I tried to deny it, the clearer it became. I wasn't watching a love story fall apart. I was starring in a parody of one. A man trapped in the greatest betrayal of his life, forced to smile through baby showers and gender reveals, while inside I was plotting revenge. The cruelest part? My cheating wife acted like nothing was wrong. She decorated the nursery, posted ultrasound pictures, and threw around phrases like "our baby," with the confidence of a magician pulling rabbits out of hats. She weaponized family values while destroying the very core of family. It was like being gaslit by the person you trusted most. Infidelity wasn't just about sex. It was about betrayal so deep it rewrote the script of who I thought I was. By the time we reached the delivery date, I already knew. I didn't need DNA tests or Maury Povich shouting, "You are not the father." The writing was on the wall. But I played along, waiting for the final act of this tragic comedy. Because when you've been dragged through toxic love, sometimes the only thing left is to embrace the drama. So yes, when Madison gave birth and the nurse handed me a baby that looked like Brad's mini-me, I didn't faint or scream. I laughed. I actually laughed like a madman in the hospital room because the parody had finally written itself. A cheating wife, a child that wasn't mine, and a man who had been betrayed so deeply that all he had left was dark humor. And that's when I knew what had to be done. The revenge wasn't going to be angry screaming or dramatic confrontations. No, my revenge was going to be colder, smarter, cleaner. I wasn't going to play the fool anymore. I wasn't going to raise another man's child while Madison played happy family on Instagram. This was America, land of divorce lawyers and DNA tests. The betrayal had run its course, and I was about to reclaim my freedom. But to understand the full scope of how messy it got, how conspiracy spiraled into courtroom drama, how parody turned into tragedy, how betrayal became my liberation, you'll have to follow me deeper into this rabbit hole. Because the day my cheating wife gave birth to a baby that wasn't mine wasn't just the end of my marriage. It was the beginning of the strangest, darkest, most satirical chapter of my life. If you think the hospital scene was the climax, you're wrong. That was just the trailer. The real movie started afterward, when I walked out of that maternity ward with the certainty that my family life had been one long episode of Cheaters, only without the TV crew barging in with cameras. My cheating wife was still inside, holding her new bundle of joy, and I was outside, holding the crumbling remains of my sanity. Now, most men would have either stormed out permanently or melted down on the spot, but not me. No, I decided to treat the whole thing like a grand conspiracy unraveling before my eyes. If my marriage was going to implode, it wasn't going to implode quietly. I would peel back every layer of this toxic love onion until my eyes burned. Because betrayal deserves exposure, and if I had to become the tinfoil hat version of Sherlock Holmes to uncover it all, so be it. The first clue came disguised as paperwork. The nurse had handed me a stack of forms to sign, including the baby's birth certificate. I froze. The pen was in my hand, but my hand refused to move. Why? Because signing that paper was like signing away my future. It was signing up to raise another man's child, to lock myself into a lifetime of betrayal disguised as family. I wasn't just looking at ink and paper. I was staring down the barrel of infidelity's cruelest joke. And in that moment, I knew my revenge would start with one word: no. But you can't just say no in America without consequences. This is the land of lawyers, lawsuits, and daytime TV court shows. Refusing to sign that certificate was like hitting a detonator. It set off a chain of explosions in my life I never could have imagined. Madison looked at me with crocodile tears, acting like I'd betrayed her. Imagine that, the cheating wife flipping the betrayal script to paint me as the villain. That's when I realized infidelity isn't just about sleeping with someone else. It's about rewriting reality until you don't even recognize yourself in the story. So I did what any betrayed husband with a taste for dark humor and paranoia would do. I started investigating. Not just Madison and Brad, but everyone, the neighbors, her friends, even the dog. Yes, I stared into the golden retriever's eyes and wondered if he knew. Because when you've been betrayed this deeply, trust becomes a myth. You start to believe in conspiracies that make QAnon look like amateur hour. I uncovered receipts for hotel rooms, not just one, but many. Business trips that looked more like romance getaways. I hacked into her email. Don't judge me. Betrayal turns you into a part-time hacker. I found love letters that made Nicholas Sparks novels look like grocery lists. And the worst part? The baby wasn't even the first time she cheated. Nope. Brad was just the most recent star in her long-running soap opera of infidelity. I should have been devastated. And in a way, I was. But mostly, I was entertained. Because the deeper I dug, the more absurd it became. It was like living inside a parody of my own life. Here I was, a middle-class American guy, the kind who pays taxes, grills burgers on the 4th of July, and cheers for his football team, suddenly discovering that my entire marriage was a Truman Show experiment gone wrong. And the producers had cast my wife as the cheating villainess, my neighbors as clueless extras, and me as the fool. Of course, Madison tried to spin it differently. She told me it was just one mistake. Then, when I pulled out the receipts, it was, okay, maybe a few mistakes. And when I showed her the emails, she upgraded to, fine, it was an emotional connection, not physical. That's the thing about infidelity. You can always count on the cheating wife to shift the narrative like a politician dodging questions. But this wasn't politics. This was betrayal. And betrayal demands revenge. So I started plotting. Not the kind of revenge where you slash tires or burn clothes on the lawn. No, I wanted legal revenge. American revenge. I wanted lawyers, custody battles, dramatic courtroom speeches, and the satisfaction of watching my cheating wife squirm under oath. My plan was simple: deny paternity, expose her infidelity, and walk away free while she was left holding her toxic love story like a rotten bouquet. But here's where the story veers into fantasy. Because the deeper I went, the more it felt like there was something bigger at play. What if Madison wasn't just cheating with Brad? What if Brad wasn't even the real father? What if this was part of some bizarre conspiracy where half the neighborhood was in on it? I know it sounds insane, but paranoia is a funny drug. Suddenly, every time I saw a man glance in Madison's direction, I wondered if he was part of the plot. The mailman, the gym instructor, the guy who sells hot dogs outside Home Depot, any one of them could have been in on the betrayal. My family wasn't just broken, it was hijacked by a network of conspirators in khaki pants. You might think I was losing my mind, but in a strange way, it gave me strength. Because paranoia makes you alert. It sharpens your senses. It turns you from victim into avenger. If infidelity was going to be my downfall, then revenge was going to be my resurrection. I wasn't just some poor fool with a cheating wife. I was a man rising from the ashes of betrayal, ready to expose toxic love for what it really is, a comedy of errors written by liars. By the time Madison begged me to reconsider, it was too late. I had evidence. I had resolve. I had revenge simmering in my veins like rocket fuel. This wasn't just about leaving a cheating wife. It was about reclaiming my life, my dignity, my identity. Infidelity had poisoned my family, but it had also woken me up. I wasn't the same man who smiled in holiday photos and believed in forever. I was the man who laughed in the maternity ward and said no to raising another man's child. So when the court summons arrived, I didn't flinch. I welcomed it, because court wasn't just going to be about custody or child support. It was going to be the stage where I turned betrayal into performance art. Madison thought she could cheat and get away with it. She thought infidelity could be hidden under a nursery mobile and Instagram filters. But she underestimated the power of revenge. And as I prepared for the battle ahead, I couldn't help but feel a twisted kind of excitement. Betrayal had burned me, but it had also transformed me. I wasn't just a victim of a cheating wife. I was the anti-hero of my own American satire. And the real show was only beginning. The courthouse smelled like mildew and bad coffee, which felt appropriate because betrayal never smells like roses. It was the kind of place where marriages come to die on paper, where family is reduced to case numbers, and where infidelity is discussed in terms of Exhibit A and Objection, Your Honor. And there I was, standing in the middle of it all, armed with a manila folder stuffed full of receipts, emails, and screenshots that made Madison, my cheating wife, look like the lead character in Toxic Love, the unauthorized Netflix series. Now, court is supposed to be serious, right? But the entire scene played out like a parody of American justice. The judge, an old guy with glasses sliding off his nose, looked like he'd rather be fishing. The bailiff looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. And Madison? She sat there, acting like the betrayed victim, dabbing fake tears with a tissue, while her lawyer spun tales about family unity and forgiveness. Forgiveness? Forgiveness for what? Turning our marriage into a community project? Her lawyer actually said with a straight face that I was being cruel for denying paternity. Cruel. As if raising another man's child wasn't the cruelest joke life could play on someone. That's when I realized this wasn't just a custody hearing. It was a theater performance. Everyone had a role. The cheating wife as the tragic heroine, her lawyer as the silver-tongued narrator, and me as the villain for daring to say no to betrayal. But here's where it gets wild. Because the moment I presented the DNA test, the undeniable proof that the child wasn't mine, the courtroom turned into chaos. Madison gasped like she'd just been cast in a soap opera cliffhanger. Her lawyer fumbled his papers. The judge actually dropped his gavel, muttering something that sounded suspiciously like, "I need a drink." And me? I leaned back in my chair with the smuggest smile America has ever seen, because this was my revenge. Sweet, cold, legal revenge. Except that's when the conspiracy twist hit. Because guess who showed up in the back row of the courtroom? Brad. Yes, that Brad, the man who turned my marriage into a parody of itself. He walked in like some sort of cowboy savior, wearing a cheap suit and chewing gum, as if this was all just casual entertainment. And then, this is the part that made my brain explode, 3 other men stood up, claiming they could also be the father. 3 other men. Suddenly, my cheating wife wasn't just starring in a scandal, she was running her own Maury Povich marathon. The judge sighed, pinched the bridge of his nose, and muttered, "Well, this just got complicated." Complicated? This was beyond complicated. This was infidelity turned into performance art. My family wasn't a family anymore. It was a mystery lottery where the prize was fatherhood. And I was the guy who ripped up his ticket and walked away. But Madison didn't give up. Oh no, she doubled down. She stood up in that courtroom, her voice shaking, and accused me of betrayal. She said I had abandoned her, that I was heartless, that I was destroying the family unit. And everyone in the room gasped like it was some Broadway show. The sheer audacity of it almost made me applaud. Because only a cheating wife could flip betrayal on its head and make the victim look like the villain. I didn't take the bait, though. Instead, I went full parody mode. I told the court everything, every receipt, every email, every whispered confession from neighbors. I painted Madison's betrayal like a Picasso painting, messy and undeniable. I described the toxic love, the infidelity, the conspiracy theories that haunted me at night. By the time I was done, half the courtroom looked like they needed therapy. The judge leaned back, exhaled, and muttered, "Well, I guess we know who's not the father." And yet, even with all the evidence, even with the betrayal laid bare, Madison still tried to cling to the fantasy of family. She begged, she cried, she said, "Don't do this, we can fix it." But here's the thing about betrayal. It's not just a crack in the glass, it's a shatter. And once it's shattered, you can't glue it back together. Family can survive hardship. Family can survive mistakes. But family cannot survive a cheating wife who turned love into a conspiracy. So I looked her in the eyes, in front of the whole courtroom, and said, "You betrayed me. You betrayed us, and I won't play your game anymore." And for the first time, she didn't have a comeback. She just sat down, silent, with her lawyer whispering in her ear and Brad pretending to check his phone. The judge ruled in my favor. No paternity, no obligation, no legal chains tying me to the child of betrayal. It was the ultimate revenge, not anger, not violence, but freedom. Freedom from toxic love. Freedom from infidelity's poison. Freedom from a family that was never really mine to begin with. But as I walked out of that courthouse, manila folder under my arm, something strange happened. A reporter, yes, apparently someone had tipped off the press, shoved a microphone in my face and asked, "Do you feel betrayed?" And I laughed. I laughed so hard they probably thought I'd lost it, because betrayed wasn't even the right word anymore. Betrayal was just the beginning. What I'd been through was a saga, a parody of marriage, a conspiracy disguised as family life. And I had survived it. Outside the courthouse, the sky looked brighter than it had in months. Maybe it was just the relief. Maybe it was just the caffeine. But for the first time, I felt alive again. My cheating wife had tried to destroy me with lies, but instead she had given me the greatest gift of all: clarity. Clarity that betrayal can't define me. Clarity that toxic love doesn't have to be my prison. Clarity that sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying your enemy. It's walking away and letting them drown in their own lies. And yet, as I stood on those courthouse steps, I couldn't shake the feeling that this story wasn't over. Because betrayal leaves ghosts. Revenge leaves echoes. And toxic love has a way of clawing back into your life when you least expect it. You'd think the courtroom victory would be the end, fade to black, roll credits, happily ever after. But betrayal doesn't fade that easily. Toxic love doesn't just disappear when a judge bangs a gavel. No, infidelity is like glitter at a kid's birthday party. You think you've cleaned it up, but weeks later, you're still finding sparkles in your carpet, in your car, in your soul. At first, I thought I was free. No legal ties, no child support. No more Instagram-perfect photo shoots of my cheating wife pretending we were the perfect family. For a while, I lived like a man reborn. I bought a motorcycle I didn't know how to ride. I joined a fantasy football league with guys who barely knew my name. I even started dating again. Though every time a woman ordered a black coffee, I almost had a PTSD flashback to Madison's sudden taste change. But then the letters started arriving. Not emails, actual letters. Handwritten, messy, paranoid scribbles that looked like they were written by someone watching too many late-night conspiracy documentaries. At first, I thought they were from Madison, some desperate attempt to claw back into my life. But no, the letters were from anonymous sources, claiming that my marriage wasn't just a story of infidelity. It was part of a bigger plot. The letters said Madison wasn't working late at the office. She wasn't just sneaking off to hotel rooms. She was part of a network, a society, a cult even. A group of suburban spouses who staged affairs, not out of lust, but out of ritual. According to the letters, betrayal was their religion, cheating was their sacrament, and toxic love was their way of life. I wanted to laugh, but deep down, after everything I'd seen, I couldn't shake the thought, what if it's true? So I investigated. Again. Because once you've gone full conspiracy mode, you can't go back. I followed Madison one night. She wasn't alone. She joined a group of people in the park, men and women in yoga pants and business suits, standing around a bonfire like it was some twisted PTA meeting. They chanted. They burned old wedding rings. One guy even shredded a copy of Family Circle magazine as if it were some kind of holy offering. And right in the middle was Madison, my cheating wife, holding a baby. The baby. Not mine. Maybe Brad's. Maybe someone else's. maybe no one's. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just my betrayal. This was a movement, a whole toxic love conspiracy playing out in plain sight. And I, the betrayed husband, had become the only one willing to expose it. I tried to tell people. My buddies at the bar laughed. My mom told me to get therapy. Even my new girlfriend suggested maybe I was projecting. But I knew the truth. Infidelity wasn't just about Madison. It was about an entire culture of lies, betrayal, and performance. Family wasn't sacred anymore. It was a costume party where everyone pretended to be something they weren't. So I decided to fight back the only way Americans know how, with a podcast. Yes, that's right. Revenge Radio, The Betrayal Files. I told the whole story, my cheating wife, the courtroom, the cult-like rituals in the park. At first, people thought it was satire, a parody. But then the episodes blew up. Listeners sent me their own stories of betrayal, of toxic love, of infidelity hidden behind smiling family photos. Suddenly, I wasn't alone. Suddenly, I was the voice of every man and woman who had been played for a fool by a cheating spouse. And that's when Madison came back. Not physically, she never dared face me again, but through a cease and desist letter. Her lawyer claimed I was defaming her character. Defaming? The woman had turned marriage into a comedy sketch and thought I was the one ruining her reputation. But instead of silencing me, the letter only made me louder. Because here's the thing about betrayal. Once you shine a light on it, it can't crawl back into the shadows. The podcast turned into a book deal. The book turned into a speaking tour. Before I knew it, I was standing on stages across America, telling packed auditoriums how my cheating wife gave birth to a baby that wasn't mine, and accidentally launched me into a new life. People laughed, people cried, people nodded in recognition. My personal hell had become public entertainment, and weirdly, that was my revenge. But the final twist came years later. I was in a small town in Arizona, giving a talk at a library when a teenager walked up to me after the event. He had dark hair, piercing eyes, and a nervous energy I recognized instantly. He looked at me and said, "I think you might be my dad." I froze, because of course, that was the cosmic punchline. Revenge, betrayal, toxic love, it all circles back eventually. Was it Madison's kid, Brad's, someone else's? I didn't know. And honestly, I didn't want to know. Infidelity had taught me one thing. Family isn't always about blood. Sometimes it's about who stands with you when betrayal tries to tear you apart. I looked at the kid and said, "Son, I may not be your father, but I can tell you this. Never let a cheating wife decide your worth. Never let betrayal break you. And never, ever trust anyone who suddenly switches to black coffee." He laughed. I laughed. And in that laughter, I realized something profound. Betrayal didn't destroy me. It rebuilt me. Infidelity didn't end my life. It gave me a new one. Toxic love tried to chain me down, but revenge set me free. So yes, the day my cheating wife gave birth to a baby that wasn't mine was the worst day of my life. But it was also the best, because it was the day I stopped being a victim and started being the author of my own story. A messy, absurd, parody-filled American story, but mine nonetheless. And if Madison is out there, listening, thanks for the betrayal. You turned me into legend.